I am still not going to give up when it comes to ZBCN. 10 cents, hypothetically, that's still my price target for this bull run, even though nothing I say is financial advice. And let me explain why. It's because when I take a look at Zebec, something that I've been really keen on it, as of late at least, is the fact that it's really focused on compliance. Now, some people out there like to wonder, okay, why does, being focused on this type of stuff even matter? Well, in my opinion, other projects out there, they're focused on getting random partnerships, trying to do this, do that, but they don't really care about compliance. And I think that right there, it kind of shows a lack of thinking about the long term, in my opinion, because I think that moving forward, if a project really wants to survive, again, for the long term, I think having compliance really does matter. And we take a look at Zebec not too long ago. They acquired a compliance firm called GateKnox. And I actually talked about that when that did happen, or at least when it was reported to. When that happened, I was very excited. But now I kind of feel like Zebec is kind of pushing this narrative that, hey, we're a project that is focused on compliance. And also on top of that, with the acquisition that Zebec did when it comes to GateKnox, they could have easily, right, pivoted and partnered with a celebrity or an athlete. But they didn't do that. They did that instead. And I think that, if anything, again, really showcases that they care about the project. They don't treat it as like a for fun thing, if that makes sense. And we have to take a look at another key aspect that Zebec is focused on, something called RWAs. Now, why is this even important, people may ask? Because take a look at a project like Ondo, for instance. It's very massive, right? Way bigger than Zebec as of right now. And that's focused on RWAs. So we kind of know that is a narrative that someone works. You know what I mean? And we have to take a look at what that is, because RWAs, what it stands for is real world asset. And for instance, if we take a look at RWA tokens, they are digital representations of physical assets on the blockchain. This really is something special because, in my opinion, we have to take a look at what markets it could be used for, like real estate. We take a look at art, for instance, stocks, bonds. There's a lot of possibilities. But again, just imagine that. A digital representation of a physical asset on the blockchain. That is absolutely game-changing, in my opinion. Zebec isn't the only one focused on this, but I like that aspect when it comes to Zebec because if we take a look at something like Ripple and Stellar, they're very kind of like simple, in my opinion. Like, sure, they have aspects of ISO 20022, they're focused on global trade and finance, they're focused on the payments market, but really I think Zebec brings more layers to what is kind of traditionally viewed as somewhat a market sector that really isn't that exciting. Because think about this, right? There's a lot of hype for blockchain gaming, NFTs, DeFi and whatnot. But there isn't really much hype when it comes to projects that are focused on global trade and finance or the payments market. And I think Zebec is kind of bringing that aspect because it's focused on AI-based PayFi. And we have to take a look at why this even matters. The AI market is predicted to reach nearly $2 trillion by 2030, according to Grandview Research. So I think that when it comes to something like Zebec, they're clearly focused on the right areas. They're not focused on some random nonsense, if that makes sense. This is what I like about them. But then the thing is, the ZBCN had a very good pump. Now it has a pullback. Everyone's like, oh man, it's never going to do well again. Well, when people ask me that question, even though I'm not telling anyone to buy ZBCN, I like to remind myself that, what? ZBCN had that major pump really without much going on for it, in a sense that the altcoin space wasn't doing the best. And also on top of that, it wasn't like Zebec was doing anything that, revolutionary. It just really had a good run. And if it did that with market conditions, which many people viewed as kind of boring and really no major catalyst at that time, could you imagine what would really happen to ZBCN if the markets really did wake up? I mean, this is why I still believe in the idea of maybe 10 cents, because not too long ago, it was around like an 11x or 13x or whatever. And then now, of course, it's over 20x away from that price again. But I just don't see why that is too unachievable, because again, ZBCN did that not too long ago without much bullish factors, really. And I like to think about this as well when it comes to Zebec. If we view, payrolls, right? I get it. Sometimes people like to think, payrolls, they're not really that interesting. Well, we have to take a look at it. Like not too long ago, initially when I was kind of talking about like Zebec, right? It was reported that there was around 50,000 monthly users, again, not too long ago. And also there was over 200 payroll enterprise clients. So we got to think about this. That's really amazing in my opinion, especially for a project, relatively speaking, kind of like not that big. Zebec has achieved some impressive stuff. And being focused on enterprises, I think is a genius move because we have to take a look back in history. What fostered the growth of the internet? That was something called enterprise adoption. the retail market helped, but you know what? Enterprises, they have the volume, they have the capital, and they have the resources to really facilitate that, growth at a much larger scale. So while other projects out there, they're focused on the retail side of things, we have to take a look at how Zebec, they're not like that. They understand that enterprises are the way to go, in theory. And I'm not saying that they completely ignore the retail side of things, because of course, not too long ago, they were talking about like a TV ad campaign. So I think that was pretty, interesting. But again, I kind of like this focus when it comes to the enterprise side of things, because I think this kind of gives something like Zebec great longevity. If it was just a project that was focused on hype and all this type of stuff, who knows if it's going to be run by the time the next cycle comes around. But this one doesn't feel like that. They acquired Science Card UK, right? Not too long ago. Focus on education through that. They also, again, focus on gate knocks, which I talked about earlier in the video. They're doing hypothetically great things, in my opinion. But the way I take a look at it is that the cherry on top is the fact that allegedly something like Circle, which by the way, recently got, publicly listed, right? Publicly traded now, which is, I think, very impressive. But Circle allegedly, which is the creator of USDC, the stablecoin, they were noted to be an early investor when it comes to Zebec. And also, it was reported that, based on a post by Zebec, at least on X, it was kind of showcasing something along the lines of how Circle was holding a pretty big amount of ZBCN. So we got to think about that. When something is as massive as Circle, again, the creator of USDC, the stablecoin, I highly doubt that they're going to be wanting to panic sell ZBCN randomly. You know what I mean? Initially, when I first saw that post, some of my friends were like, oh, that's kind of alarming, man. Why does Circle hold a lot of, ZBCN? Isn't that kind of bad? Well, again, how is it bad? Circle is really massive. Like, for them, probably their ZBCN holdings won't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. I mean, again, USDC is doing way better than Zebec. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really need that. But then they believe in it anyways, So then I think that gives ZBCN a lot of stability. I mean, if let's say like one of the early investors of Zebec was like something that we don't really know, we just don't know what is the situation that they're going through, who knows, right, what they would do with that amount of holdings. But then when it comes to Circle, I just kind of feel like they won't be doing anything too, random like that, right? I don't think they would just randomly be like, oh yeah, we're exiting or something. It just doesn't give me that vibe. Now, of course, I can't tell the future. I don't know. But then again, that's just kind of the vibe that it's given, right? Not to mention Solana. We all know it's a very massive layer 1 blockchain, but, Solana Ventures, allegedly, one of the early investors when it comes to Zebec. And I think, arguably, they did make a pretty good call on that, because ZBCN not too long ago was top 10 in terms of utility when it comes to Solana. So I think, really, this is something that I'm very excited for. 10 cents. Again, some people are like, oh man, that's kind of bad and all this. Well, here's the thing. Zebec cards, right? Some people like to make fun of that, but really, I think it's very impressive because it's powered by MasterCard, and also it supports many blockchains like Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Solana, the Base Network, which is Coinbase's layer 2, Tron. I'm just naming a few there, but I'm just saying, this is how impressive Zebec is. So when I take a look at all that type of stuff, 10 cents, it doesn't seem too ridiculous to me. It's just a waiting game. I'm still going to do what I originally did, and that is just dollar cost averaging. Anytime I acquire income, acquire my favorite projects, hold, and I just wait. Literally, that's it. And again, 10 cents, considering current circulating supply market cap, at that point around $8.5 billion. I don't think that is too unrealistic. I mean, XRP right now has a market cap that is well beyond $100 billion. I mean, come on, this doesn't seem too ridiculous, at least in my hypothetical opinion. But even besides that, I'm still not going to give up when it comes to Zebec. And make sure to subscribe if you gain value from this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's only the captain. I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm a peace. Bye.